The fire is dying. You can feel it before you see it. The warmth that pressed against your face a moment ago has pulled back, and the darkness around you is getting heavier. You pull a hide tighter across your shoulders. Somewhere beyond the edge of the light, something moves. This is not a nightmare. This is just Tuesday night. For roughly 300,000 years, this was the default human experience after sunset. And what your ancestors did in those hours, how they thought, who they talked to, and what they feared, turns out to be one of the most revealing windows into what it means to be human at all. You probably assume ancient nights were silent and brutal, that early humans huddled in terrified silence, waiting for predators to take them. That darkness was the enemy. But the anthropological record tells a very different story. And once you hear it, you will never think about your own nights the same way again. Start with the fire. Almost every archaeological site associated with Homo sapiens and our close relatives shows evidence of controlled fire use, with some sites pushing that evidence back hundreds of thousands of years. Fire was not just warmth. It was not just protection. Anthropologist Polly Wiessner spent decades studying the hoansi San people of the Kalahari, a group of hunter-gatherers whose way of life preserves many features of how humans lived before agriculture. What she found when she compared daytime and nighttime conversations was striking. During the day, people talked almost exclusively about practical things: food, tools, disputes, work. But once the sun went down and the fire came up, something shifted. The conversations changed completely. People told stories. Not just any stories. Stories about people who were not present. Stories about distant relatives, remembered hunts, spirits, moral lessons, and mythological figures. Wiessner found that roughly 81% of nighttime conversations around the fire were devoted to what she called the social imagination, the mental modeling of people, relationships, and events beyond the immediate physical world. Daytime was for survival. Night was for meaning. This matters more than it might sound. Anthropologists have long argued that one of the defining features of modern human cognition is the ability to think about things that are not right in front of you, to simulate other minds, to plan for distant futures, to build shared beliefs with strangers you have never met. If Wiessner's research is right, the campfire at night may have been the original classroom for this capacity. Your ancestors were not just warming themselves by the fire. They were building the cognitive architecture that makes civilization possible. So let's reconstruct a night. Picture yourself somewhere in what is now southern Africa, roughly 50,000 years ago. The sun drops fast near the equator. By the time the last light fades, your group of maybe 20 or 30 people has gathered near a central fire. Children are still awake, pressed against adults, watching the flames. Someone begins a story, not with a prologue or an introduction, just straight into it, the way you might drop into a conversation already in progress. The group listens. Someone interrupts with a detail they remember differently. Someone else laughs. A child falls asleep mid-sentence against an elder's arm. You are not afraid of the dark right now. The fire creates a circle of belonging. The darkness beyond it exists, but it is not inside the circle with you. Sleep, when it came for your ancestors, did not come the way it comes for you. Anthropologist Jerome Siegel and his colleagues studied the sleep patterns of 3 pre-industrial hunter-gatherer groups: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia, and found something that overturns almost everything modern sleep science has assumed. These groups did not go to sleep at sunset and wake at sunrise. They went to sleep on average 3 hours and 20 minutes after sunset. They woke before dawn. Their total sleep averaged just under 6.5 hours per night, and almost none of them reported insomnia. Read that again. People sleeping in conditions closest to those of your ancestors, no electricity, no climate control, no mattresses, slept less than 7 hours a night, and almost never had trouble falling or staying asleep. Meanwhile, modern humans in temperature-controlled rooms on expensive mattresses report epidemic levels of sleeplessness. Something went wrong somewhere between then and now, and it may not be the darkness. Siegel's team found that temperature was a key driver of ancestral sleep timing. These groups did not fall asleep when the light went out. They fell asleep as the temperature dropped toward its nightly minimum, usually in the hours just after midnight, and they woke as it began to rise again before dawn. Their bodies were not tracking clocks. They were tracking the thermal rhythm of the earth itself. There is also strong evidence that ancestral sleep was not always a single unbroken block. Historian Roger Ekirch spent decades studying references to sleep in historical documents from medieval and early modern Europe and found consistent references to what was called first sleep and second sleep, two distinct sleep phases separated by an hour or more of wakefulness in the middle of the night. People would wake, lie quietly, pray, talk to a partner, or simply think before drifting back into what they called second sleep. Ekirch argues this two-phase pattern may have been the human default before artificial lighting began extending the evening and compressing sleep into a single anxious block. If you have ever woken at 3 a.m. and felt strangely alert, you may be experiencing the ghost of a sleep pattern your body still remembers. But night was not only fire, stories, and sleep. It was also the primary arena for something else entirely: the sacred. Across virtually every documented ancient and indigenous culture, nighttime is when contact with the spirit world, the ancestors, and the forces that govern the living world was most possible. The darkness was not empty. It was populated. This was not metaphor. For the people living it, the boundary between the visible and invisible world genuinely thinned after dark. The painted caves of Europe offer one window into this. Sites like Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, both dating back tens of thousands of years, were decorated deep inside caverns where no natural light reached at all. The only way to see the paintings was by firelight, which made the animals on the walls flicker and appear to move. Archaeologist David Lewis Williams has argued that these deep cave spaces functioned as locations for altered states, places where the boundary between the everyday world and the world of visions deliberately collapsed. You went in with fire. You experienced something in the shifting light and the absolute darkness. You came back changed. Night was also when you learned to read the sky. Without artificial light, the Milky Way was not a faint smear. It was a river of light wide enough to cast shadows. The stars were not decoration. They were navigation, calendar, and cosmology. The Pleiades star cluster, known by hundreds of different names across cultures that never had contact with each other, marked the planting season for some peoples and the time of the dead for others. Your ancestors spent more time looking up in a single week than most modern humans will in a lifetime. The night sky was not background. It was information. Danger was real too. Large predators, lions, leopards, hyenas, and others, are predominantly nocturnal. Your ancestors knew this. The fire was not romantic. It was a calculated defense. Archaeological evidence from sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa suggests hominins were using fire over 1 million years ago, and the ability to maintain a fire through the night represented a genuine survival advantage. Predators that might take a lone sleeping human would rarely approach an active fire surrounded by a wakeful group. The social circle and the fire circle were the same circle, and yet the research keeps returning to one finding that should surprise you. Across documented hunter-gatherer groups, nighttime was not primarily remembered as terrifying. It was remembered as alive, as the time when people were most fully themselves, most talkative, most imaginative, most connected to each other and to whatever forces they believed moved through the world. Your body still carries all of this. Your natural circadian rhythm still tries to sync with temperature rather than clocks. Your brain still activates differently at night, more associative, more creative, more prone to the kind of loose lateral thinking that produces insight rather than logic. The late-night idea that seems brilliant and strange at the same time is not a malfunction. It is a feature. It is your ancestral brain doing what it was shaped over hundreds of thousands of years to do. Reach beyond the visible, connect the distant, imagine what is not yet real. The fire is dying. You can feel it before you see it. But now you know what your ancestors did next. They told a story. They watched the stars. They slept in two pieces, waking in the dark middle to think thoughts that could not survive the daylight. And when the temperature began to rise again before dawn, they opened their eyes, already knowing what kind of day was coming, because the night had told them everything they needed to know.